Education Management Services facilitated a workshop on developing and implementing excellent online education in terms of leadership, operations, and curriculum. My name is Willeke, and my particular focus was the curriculum aspect of the workshop. This presentation is therefore directed towards higher education academic leadership in terms of shaping their online programs for curriculum design. For us as administrators of complex systems, considering a phrase like change is the new constant can really make our hearts stop. However, once we recover from that, it is important to realize that our survival depends on this mindset. And then, if we want to thrive, we have to move forward from simply accepting change and start innovating. Now, there's a lot of scale across the meaning of innovation. It doesn't mean you have to change the world. It simply means by staying true to your vision, you have to stay flexible in how you get there. And that flexibility will give you a lot of opportunities. So what is the current frame of education? I hate to even call this a traditional setting because I think that term itself can be a constraint. So let's call it the current expectations in education. What do our consumers expect out of us? So first, of course, our consumers are going to demand speed. The demand for speed is a domino effect for this digital age because everything we do is wrapped around speed. We have Dilbert's boss who likes to demonstrate bad management practices by saying, work smarter, not harder. But technology is allowing us to actually accomplish that. The problem is not the lack of technology, it's our ability to catch up to what it can do for us. Back in the 60s, the eminent adult learning theorist Hull noted that adult learners are primarily goal-oriented, and we're seeing his research come to fruition with this because there's such a high demand for competencies. So what skill are we giving them, and how does it apply to their goals? That does not mean to throw away the liberal arts. We're just simply saying it's important to fine-tune our approach for being relevant to this digital age and this particular target audience. Any adult learning program with a good recruitment process is going to grow at a great pace, but the side effect of that pace is usually that it's not sustainable for full-time faculty. So you need to consider adjunct faculty, and there is an added advantage for using adjunct faculty in that they are already familiar with the adult approach and they are in the career field that is being taught, so we have heavy practice. However, to use adjunct faculty, you must have curriculum that can scale. The burden of development really cannot fall onto them. Then we have authentic assessment, and this is sometimes misunderstood as the not college enough approach. The philosophy really ditches tests and the lower level cognitive learning such as defining or listing or stating that we think that they must be able to accomplish before they can go to higher levels. But rather consider embedding those into higher level learning experiences such as explaining, understanding, describing, etc. And measure not the test if they can list characteristics, but measure their collaborative ability to see if the learner can effectively contribute to how those characteristics can be implemented in certain real-life environments. And then lastly, current expectations of education is to frankly keep their attention. Reading pages of supplemental text is going to lose them pretty quickly. Images, quick 2 to 3 minute videos, 7 to 10 minute interactive webinars, chunked written content, animated videos, web-based articles, all these and so much more are essential media to help students maximize their attention to a topic. So those points were important to survivability issues. However, let's look at some issues that can really ensure that we thrive. Learning management systems used to be a limited resource, but now they're being turned out like apps. So many larger LMS companies will try and sell all their whistles and bells, but they aren't always needed. So you have to consider your situation and understand that the research needed for an LMS is what kind of data are you going to get out of it. Statistics, completion time, time spent on pages, frequency to pages. These are just basic data analysis points that you must be able to gather, because that information is going to help you group patterns and develop personalized learning. Then we have gamification. And this can be a scary world for us in higher education, because we don't manage projects around technology. But we have to be able to embrace this, because it is an important aspect to learning's future. We have to remember that learners retain as low as 10% of what they read, as low as 20% of what they hear. But when you turn the tables and have them perform tasks even in a simulated environment, that number of retention shoots up to 90%. Now, even if we were grossly exaggerating these numbers, which these numbers are actually real, we can get them from publications, and this particular one I got from EdTech, Focus on Higher Education publication. But the bottom line is, let's say the numbers are just, they're exaggerated. Even if it's lower than 50%, we have to be concerned and understand how adults are learning, and consider other methods of making sure that they retain the information. So going back to personalization a little bit that I spoke about just a second ago, it probably feels like I'm being a little obnoxious when I say scale your curriculum, but then make sure it's tailored to your learner, which is a bit of an oxymoron, it may feel like. But you really actually do have a lot of options for personalization, even with a preset scalable curriculum. In fact, I would posit that you have more options with a preset scalable curriculum. Some of these options can include providing students their options on how to perform an assessment, how to present content, leverage the student's personal interests, even allow students to choose their own learning path. And then we get to in-learning, mobile learning. And this can really be on the previous slide, because students want this right now. However, adult education hasn't caught up well with those options on a program level. However, we really need to get there, and your potential students want to have that easy access on any device. So even if you accomplish the mobile learning on the program level, which will be fantastic, keep in mind that more mature development awaits you by including contextual learning, QR code implementation, GPS tools, lots of ways to make your in-learning very robust. And from a developmental perspective, it's important that the learning is presented differently. If we think we need to chunk it carefully in learning management systems, we have to really chunk the learning in very digestible, small ways on a mobile or in a device. Cognitive overload in our age is really tremendous. So the more we intentionally limit exposure to learning in chunks, the better for them to effectively learn. The more they're going to feel good about it and then stay in the program. So after that overview on what our consumers are demanding, the next question is, at least in my world of curriculum design, what are the curriculum distinctives for a good online program? Regardless of anything else I have discussed so far, there are some very basic bottom line features that are needed in any online curriculum. The first is mixing the type of learning that students are experiencing. Having all discussion-driven work or all research-driven writing does a disservice to the learner. 3 essential skills are really needed for learners on a meta level, and those are the ability to collaborate effectively, the ability to reflect effectively, and the ability to research effectively. As a result, a baseline for each block of learning should always include each of these learning types. I already mentioned the importance of chunking learning content in this world of cognitive overload, so the embedding of resources needed for each activity really helps towards that end. Courses that have a huge list of reading at the top of a week, followed by a list of assignments, really has already created a dissonance for that learner. We have forced them to try and figure out the matching game. And it can be instinctive for us to say, well, they should know what goes with what if they just read it. But we have to remember those personalization features. There should be reading There should be watching, there should be listening. These should be options for them. I guarantee they're not going to do all of them, but they may do one of them. And for that to be successful, you really have to group your resources with the relevant assignment. This third point is really just my not being able to help myself as an instructional designer to get a little bit into the weeds, but it is a crucial point. I see course after course with some objectives up front and some assignments in the back, and there's no particular connection point between them. We have to be able to connect those dots to engage the intrinsic motivation for the learner. And then lastly, despite the content we provide through various medium, additional supporting sources and tools are very beneficial to the students. We don't want to overwhelm them by giving them a gigantic list of tools, but give them the tools at the right time, at the right place. For example, when I introduce students to developing research papers, I always provide a citation tool for them so they can fill out the correct information in the correct field and out pops the correctly formatted reference. Two things happen with this. First, I get really well-formatted references, and I don't have to spend 70% of my time on formatting corrections when I should be focusing on their content and research development. Second, students feel like they get to learn on the competencies they care about because I can focus on the content. It's a simple tool. It's not a complicated publisher-driven software that ties us to a publisher. Those are occasionally needed, but it's important to recognize when we need the high-touch tools and when we just need to provide them a little bit of support to help them stay focused on what the competency is for that assignment. So let's say you have achieved all of those features in a wonderfully scalable degree program. We want to bump up the quality and take those next steps for growth. So these points drive back to my introductory points. In order to grow, we have to be scalable. In order to be scalable, we have to have standardization. Again, this is not taking away the options for personalization, but it standardizes the components that provides you the space to personalize, to give them that personalization. Examples would include the appearance and presentation to be the same for every course. Expectations largely revolve around rubrics. If you have multiple rubrics for discussions, students are going to be focused on the rules of the game rather than the content. So keep it simple, keep it standard, so your students have the space to learn the content that they need to be learning. Accessibility across devices really points back to the mobile learning options. This is what learners want, but it's not as easy as slapping a URL in your iPhone Safari. Even simple websites look incredibly different than computer to smartphone to tablet. When I go to download apps like Amazon, they have an app for each type of device because they are developed differently and will interact with that device differently. While I have no desire to scare anybody from going for this, I just want to be clear that it's not a simple process. It does take planning, investment, and a very clear implementation plan. Lastly, but most importantly in my mind, is the coaching approach with your facilitators. There is never a one-size-fits-all because of the different audiences, degree programs, and facilitation skills. I could probably talk for days on this topic, but suffice to say, there are several options, and that the bottom line is a needed mindset of the facilitator to be a coach, not a professor. We have talked about guide on the side instead of sage on the stage. I'm saying take this a step farther. Forget facilitator. Let's go for coach. We need to have a coaching mindset. This slightly sarcastic comment is unfortunately too true. Organizations do not care about formatting standards, test taking, or rubrics. They want their employees to be articulate and skilled in the areas of expertise that they're hiring. So to have a sellable program, we have to get down to who the audience is in order to prepare them effectively. As mentioned earlier with Houle, who had found that adult learners are mostly goal-oriented, we see this again in that really your prospective adult learners just want a promotion or a job, or a different job, or a better job. What you're hearing here is career. There are those who are learners for the sake of learning, But that argument for education is fading fast because MOOCs and self-teaching programs like the Teaching Company gives those types of individuals the exact type of resources they need to pursue their goals. However, we have some challenges. They usually have been out of school for a number of years and are frankly really freaked out. So imagine a child in a dark room. Just close your eyes and pretend you're in a dark room when you were 8. There are no windows. There are no doors, visible at least. There are 4 different people, though, that you hear, and they're yelling at you on where to go and how to get there. You also have in your hand a smartphone, so you can GPS your way out, too. So how can you fail? You only have 4 people screaming at you, and you have a smartphone in your hand. This is not hard. Actually, it's incredibly overwhelming. We can count the ways that the failure is going to happen. And just remember, those are your students. My early days of instructional design was heavily influenced with the mindset of keeping it simple. I naturally kind of like to complicate things. So this was a hard lesson that I continually work to learn. However, I always know that I can make it simpler, and I strive to achieve that. And that is what we all need to work on. Remember the child in the room. We just want to help the child get out. We want to help the learner get to their goals. So ensuring your programs are very goal-oriented is absolutely critical. Benchmark and research deeply into your potential programs and make sure that it is very applicable to developing careers. Once you do that, you start building around that program to help people develop specializations within that field. Then once you determine your plan, work to stay focused on the skills. It's highly doubtful that your typical adult learner cares about postgraduate work. They want proficiency for their career, and we have to stay focused on that. Within those programs, though, make sure that you don't become a silo of content around the topics. Research is telling us that organizations are really clamoring for 3 major skills in their potential employees: decision-making skills, critical thinking skills, and communication skills. If we do not help learners develop these soft skills within the competency development that we're trying to give them, they're still not going to get what they need. This is why a coaching mindset is so critical. This is why I was saying professor's off the table, facilitator, that's okay, but let's go for the coaching mindset. And even an academic coaching program within your institution could be really useful. The bottom line is that there is never a silver bullet. If you are weak in any of these particular links, then your chain is going to collapse. No one person can solve or advise on any of these topics. No one department can be the one to take your entire team across the finish line. The teamwork within each of these areas are critical to the success of your adult program. So I encourage you to take a walk or do what works for you to reflect, and then consider what in this presentation resonated with you and what action you might take as a result. If you wish to talk further with Education Management Services, definitely do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you.